Welcome again. This is Pastor Jeff Short, and you are witnessing Christ and Culture, a weekly program where we try to tackle the topics in the news and we try to come at them from a Christian perspective. And I just read online that Willow Creek Community Church, that church that I've covered before in different programs, Willow Creek Community Church has hired a 4-person advisory team to try to get to the bottom of these allegations against the former lead pastor, Bill Hybels. Now, if you remember before, over the last year, there have been allegations against Bill Hybels. I think the number now of women alleging something has gone up to 10. So ranging from maybe an extended hug to all the way up to more serious. The last allegation was that he had been involved in a sexual relationship with a woman. This has happened over 30 years ago, but there are 10 women ranging from, again, like the extended hug to this actual sexual allegation that have come forward in the last few years. And it has really thrown the Willow Creek Church into confusion because it's hard to determine what is true and what is not true. Originally, there was an investigation by the elders over the last few years, and the elders have found Bill Hybels not guilty, that he didn't do these things, or that there isn't credible evidence to rise to the level of doing anything against him, such as removal, firing him, etc. So the elders came to that conclusion sometime in March, but between March and today, there have been questions about whether they actually went about their investigation properly. Now, we don't know exactly what the problems were with their original investigations. We haven't heard from the elders. We haven't gotten a detailed list of the problems with their initial investigations. For example, you have this elders team that originally investigated these allegations and cleared Bill Hybels of any of these accusations that would warrant removal. Well, now the church has experienced a tumultuous time during the summer. The 2 pastors that were appointed by Hybels before he retired, they have quit. The entire elder board that was involved in this investigation over the years, it has stepped down. So it's having to recruit a whole new elders board, and it's also having to search for a new lead pastor and assistant pastor and so on and so forth. So it's a big mess over there. And what seemed to prompt this whole big crisis was that there was a more serious allegation this past summer that rose up in the New York Times. A woman claimed that she had a sexual encounter with Hybels some 20, I think it was 30 years ago, 1985. So that would be 30 years ago. And this has led to many women, especially, to question the initial investigations where Hybels was found not guilty. So we have a situation here where there's a lot of rumor, there's a lot of gossip, there is a lot of influence coming from outside the church, especially in the Me Too, #MeToo era. You have people from within the Willow Creek Church. In fact, you have the former lead pastor woman, Heather Larson, who had taken the place of Hybels at the church as the lead pastor. She's actually come out and said something like, well, I have no reason to doubt the truthfulness of these allegations coming from these women. Again, what an astonishing statement. If you think about that statement alone, here are accusers accusing the senior pastor of a church with 10 separate allegations. In other words, these are not 10 women all witnessing or testifying to the same event. These are 10 separate allegations, 10 separate accusations, and a lead pastor at the church says, well, she has no reason to question or doubt these women. Well, that's simply nonsense. What she could have said was, I am going to look into this. I'm going to let the investigation fulfill its duty. I am going to look at the evidence. I neither doubt nor affirm these women's testimonies. I need to wait and withhold judgment. I will not rush to judgment. I will be fair. I will try to be impartial. I will try to look at this from an objective standpoint. No, here you have a high leader in the Willow Creek Church saying, well, I have no reason to really doubt these women's stories. Well, yes, you do, because they're making accusations, uncorroborated accusations. You have to wait until the process of investigation is through, and then, based on the evidence, make your conclusions. So we have a lot of irresponsible statements like that. We also have some outside evangelical influences coming in and influencing the whole situation. For example, there's theologian Scott McKnight, who teaches in Chicago, and he's written an influential blog, and they have influenced a lot of the thinking at Willow Creek. And he comes out and he's throwing around terms like hashtag Me Too and hashtag Time's Up, and he's incorporating a lot of these slogans into his analysis of this situation. Again, bringing in this outside secular, non-Christian movement that we see clearly has gone excessive and totally inappropriate. For example, the hashtag Me Too movement, their slogan is believe the women, believe the survivors. In other words, whatever a woman says in accusing a man, you're to automatically believe the woman. That's their slogan. That's the hashtag Me Too movement's maxim, believe the woman. And here you have a theologian, Scott McKnight, evangelical, influential. He's coming in, looking at the Willow Creek situation, and says, we believe the women. Before an investigation, before cross-examination, before any kind of judicial process, he's mimicking or copying the slogans of the hashtag Me Too movement. He's also throwing in the hashtag Time's Up sloganeering at the same time. So you have these currents floating about Willow Creek, and you have people making accusations without any corroborating evidence. You have people making accusations without any cross-examination of their testimony. You have people just forming their own opinions based on news bit here, or somebody says this, or somebody says that, rumor, innuendo, and so forth. And the problem with this is you have Willow Creek leadership taking all of that seriously instead of saying we have to get to the bottom of this with a real investigation and use concrete, tangible, hard evidence to form our opinions. That was not done. That was not done. It wasn't done by the elders at the end of their process. It was not done with the leadership of Willow Creek after Bill Hybels stepped down and retired early. It was just a big mess, and it still is a mess, because now you have a 4-person panel that has been chosen to try to come in and finally get closure on this and figure out what in the world is happening. What is true, what is false, who's telling the truth, who's not, who's lying, who's telling the truth, and so forth. So this 4-person panel, 2 women, 2 men. I guess that has to be that way today because there has to be some kind of a balance, because, again, there has to be this Me Too, hashtag Me Too, hashtag Time's Up. There's this clamoring for women have to have a voice, and so you have this 2-man, 2-woman panel. The problem with this panel right off the bat is when we look on the Willow Creek website, they say one of the key goals of this 4-person panel and investigation, they hope to wrap it up by the early 2019, and we hope that they do, because if they can do that, then we can get rid of this cloud of suspicious over the entire Willow Creek Church, and they can begin to do what they're supposed to do as a church instead of being preoccupied by this scandal. Well, anyway, one of the stated goals of the four-person panel and this final investigation is very problematic. And one of the goals is to make it right for all the women and those who have been hurt. So they want to make right women who have been hurt, and they want to make it right with the women. Well, why would you say that before you even look at the evidence? Because maybe, just maybe, these, quote, women don't need to have anything made right because what they said wasn't true. Is that even a possibility? Why are we beginning to talk in terms of these women as victims before we even have established that they are victims? Now, if we've learned anything from this Brett Kavanaugh hearing, Supreme Court nominee to the Supreme Court, and the Senate Judiciary Committee hearings, if we've learned anything from that circus, we have to learn that you can't assume that the accuser is truthful. You can't assume it. You have to have that proved. You have to have evidence that supports the accuser's claims. So in other words, the victim cannot be assumed to be a victim. You can't begin to call an accuser a survivor because you don't know if this claim is true. You could only call the person a survivor if you have proven that the accusation is true. If we've learned anything, we need to hold to the principle of justice, presumption of innocence. A person is presumed innocent until proven guilty. So if you apply that to the Willow Creek situation, Bill Hybels is innocent of all of these charges until the charges are proven in a fair process. Okay, so you don't go into the process saying, well, part of the process is to make right for these women and all who have been hurt. Maybe nobody's been hurt. Maybe nobody has to be made right because maybe the only person here that's a victim is Bill Hybels. I don't know. Nobody knows. So you don't go into the investigation already with the whole process rigged to the point where these women now we're trying to make right for the women. Maybe some of these women have a legitimate grievance. Maybe some of these women have been hurt. Maybe some of them deserve some kind of to make right to them. Maybe. But again, that comes at the end of the investigation, not at the beginning of the investigation. I've been saying all along. Where's the presumption of innocence to Bill Hybels? Where's the due process that is due him when he faces accusations? Where is the cross-examination of the witnesses? Where is the response by Bill Hybels to these accusations? You have to have a process that is fair and just for both parties, the accused and the accuser. You have to have fairness. Now, in the Me Too, #MeToo movement, you don't have to have fairness. You just simply believe the women. Believe the, quote, survivors. You don't even have to know if they actually suffered. You don't have to know if their accusations are actually true. They represent all women, we're told, and so whether their actual case is valid or not, they represent, quote, women in general, and women have been oppressed and harassed and persecuted and all this stuff, and so they're victims right off the bat, and so you don't have to question them. They are automatically to be believed. Well, again, that's not fair. That's not just. That's not our system. That's not any kind of justice system, and it doesn't work that way, and you can't do that in a church situation either. So I made a video a few months ago about saying to Bill Hybels, you need to come forward, you need to speak, You need to address these issues. Perhaps he's not speaking, and perhaps he's not addressing them because there wasn't a proper forum for him to do so. Because again, you don't do all of this stuff in the media. You don't do all of this stuff that needs to be done sometimes in a secretive form. There needs to be confidentiality. Sometimes the witnesses that are interviewed need to be held in confidence. Sometimes all the information does not need to be released to the population through the press. And so there needs to be an orderly process for these claims to be processed. And they are claims. We have to remember, it's just like in this Brett Kavanaugh hearing. There was no question in my mind and in the minds of almost everyone who looked at this objectively that he was being smeared. He was being destroyed. There was an attempt to destroy his life because of political reasons. Now, we don't have that strong political motivation on the part of the women accusing Bill Hybels. But we still need to have a fair process for him to have his day in court, so to speak. He needs to be able to hear exactly what the accusations are of his accusers. He needs to be able to have those accusers questioned, cross-examination, just in the manner as we saw with the Brett Kavanaugh situation. There was a prosecutor for the Republicans. Her name was Rachel Mitchell, and she calmly and deliberately asked the accuser questions, and that needs to happen in the Bill Hybels situation. Every single woman who accuses Bill Hybels of something needs to be questioned in that manner, and they need to take as long as they need to get the information. Then every one of those accusers needs to bring forth evidence that would connect their accusation with tangible, concrete evidence that would show that what their story is credible. Okay? So that's the proof part. That's the corroboration part. There needs to be that. If you don't have any proof, if you don't have any corroboration, then your claim gets tossed, thrown out. That's not to say it didn't happen. It just means that your claim doesn't have any evidence to support it, and you can't charge someone and convict someone without evidence. You have to have concrete evidence. You have to be cross-examined, and then the evidence has to be brought in, and it has to be weighed. Okay, so if we learn anything from the Kavanaugh hearings, we learn that there needs to be due process, there needs to be the presumption of innocence, and that the accusations and the witnesses need to be cross-examined, and there needs to be corroborating evidence. Now, I don't know what the process is of this new Willow Creek investigation that should be wrapping up sometime in early 2019. I don't know what they're doing. Hopefully, we will have some kind of report that explains the whole process, very transparent process, saying, okay, we interviewed this person, this witness was cross-examined, here are the questions that were asked, here are the responses of the woman who made this accusation. Then the next woman brought in, we questioned her, we cross-examined her. Then we brought in Bill Hybels, we questioned him, we cross-examined him. Here are the results of that. And then findings and a conclusion, what probably took place for these reasons. We conclude this, and then that will bring closure, and only that. But this trying Bill Hybels in the press, where you have one woman's accusation, she goes to Chicago Tribune, and then another woman goes to the New York Times, and then somebody else says something from Christianity Today magazine, and so people are pulling interviews from the New York Times, and then they're pulling interviews from the Chicago Tribune. Some people are pulling information from Christianity Today magazine. Somebody heard somebody say this, somebody heard somebody say that, and it's a big, disorganized, chaotic mess. That is not the way you conduct an investigation. So what needs to happen is this due process needs to be followed. And it looks like, unfortunately, it looks like right off the bat, the process is stacked against Bill Hybels. It looks like the assumption of guilt is laid upon Bill Hybels by the way Willow Creek is going about this investigation, and it looks like the assumption of innocence and truthfulness is given to the women accusers. That's what it looks like. For the reason I just gave, that already up front, Willow Creek is explaining this investigation process. One of the goals is to make things right for the women and anyone who has been hurt. You don't say you're going to make things right for the women and those who have been hurt unless you already assume that Bill Hybels has hurt someone, these women, and that they need to have their hurts attended to. You don't make that assumption if it's a fair due process. And Willow Creek seems to have already made that assumption. Unless they're saying, if these women are not all telling the truth, then making things right means that they are going to be publicly rebuked and possibly even slapped with some kind of a libel or slander charge. I don't know. I don't think that's what Willow Creek is talking about. I don't think that Willow Creek is in any way, shape, or form saying that these women have any possibility of being wrong. I think what they're meaning when they say part of the process of this investigation is to make right for these women and people that have been hurt in this, what they're talking about is that these women have been hurt by Bill Hybels because he's already guilty in the minds of these people, and now they're just there going to find out how guilty he is and prove that he's guilty. That is not a fair due process. So it looks like that Willow Creek has gone from one extreme whereby they concluded that Bill Hybels was totally innocent of all the charges. Now they're going to swing all the way over to the other side and they're going to say Bill Hybels is guilty of all these charges and the women are telling the truth because we're supposed to automatically, up front, believe the women. So it sounds like Willow Creek, in reaction to what they say now is an error, they say that the initial investigation into Bill Hybels' alleged misconduct was flawed. That 3-year process where the elders had investigated, they're saying that's totally flawed. Yeah, that's totally flawed. And now they're swinging to the other side and they're saying, they're presuming that Bill Hybels is already guilty and they're just trying to find out why and how he's guilty. And that doesn't look like a very fair process. So we'll have to look and wait and watch and see what happens. But again, I think we need to learn in the church a couple things from this Kavanaugh process and apply it to our own situations whenever these things come up in the church. And it's coming up in Willow Creek's situation, but it could come up in your church, it could come up in my church. And that is, we need to not allow the culture and social movements that are impacting us in the news, media, social media, internet, newspapers, universities, our whole culture, we need to not allow those forces to interfere with an objective and unbiased process of determining the truth. Because as Christians, we're after the truth. We're not after trying to be trendy and cool and hip and into the latest Me Too movement or Time's Up movement or whatever the next hashtag movement is. That is totally separate. We really shouldn't even let any of that influence us. The only question we need to ask is, what is the truth? And is there evidence to support some claim against someone else or some accusation against someone else? The Bible says very specifically, do not entertain an accusation against an elder or a leader in the church except there be two or more witnesses. So a single claim against a leader by a single individual cannot be the thing that makes him leave in disgrace. There needs to be confirmation by at least two people of this alleged offense. Now, in Bill Hybels' case, there are 10 separate allegations so far. That's not 10 allegations of the same event. That's 10 separate allegations of 10 separate events. We need to have, for example, on the first allegation, whatever it is, I can't even think of in my mind what happens to be the first allegation, but we need to have two or more witnesses to the first allegation in order to show that it's true. Now, that witness could be hard evidence, it could be the testimony of another person, and so forth. And if these allegations are true, or if even some of them are true, they will have evidence, they will have witnesses, they will have corroborating support. And anyone who does a good job of investigating these things, you have 10 of them, if there's any truth to them, that will be brought out, either through questioning the direct witnesses for their contradictions, if there are any, or questioning Bill Hybels on them and his contradictions. The truth will come out, and we can do this, but we have to keep our eyes on the fairness of the process. Innocent until proven guilty. The accused has to have corroborating evidence for those claims to be validated. And we need to remain objective, and we can't resort to emotionalism and hysteria and passions. We need to be very focused on the truth and not be swayed by distractions that are trying to call our attention away. And so if we can do that, Willow Creek can get to the bottom of this, and any church that's in a similar situation can get to the bottom of that. And the people who did wrong can be confronted and rebuked publicly at this point. That needs to happen. And the people who are innocent can be exonerated and cleared and apologized to. And in that way, we can build a truthful community. And that's the goal of the church. We are truthful people. We want the truth. That's what we live and die for, the truth of the Bible, of God, of the gospel. And so in this issue is no different. But if we go about it in a fair and balanced and truthful manner, we will arrive at that truth. So I hope it happens. Let's stay tuned, and we'll see you back next week on another program. God bless.